Given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of the game.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, WillE here. Given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game. This is a quote from Soren Johnson, co-designer of Civ 3, lead designer of Civ 4. RTS games are basically its thing. And after having now finished writing this video up and starting to get to recording, I'm not really sure what the point of it is. Maybe it'll make you think about how you or people around you play the game, why people insist on doing things in certain ways, and perhaps
because they don't want to waste their fucking time. That's why. It's actually pretty fucking simple. Players optimize fun out of the game because what they enjoy is being fun. Like, once you know that you're wasting your time, it's like the facade of it being a game fades away, and then you just realize that you're wasting your time and handicapping yourself. It's like a weird, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I can't speak for myself here. That's the way that I perceive it.
World of Warcraft has changed in the direction that it has over the years, so make of it what you will. Let's start off with some words from Ian. Has it cost us? He doesn't need an introduction, I think.
What's
Today,
this
people are
motherfucker
almost
got to
trained
say?
to min-max. The community pushes people in that direction, especially socially, even if it's not your preferred playstyle. The people who may want you in your group or may not are holding you to some of those standards. Once it's knowable, you are expected to know. Sid Meier, the grandfather of the Civilization series, once claimed that it's a developer's responsibility to protect the players from themselves. People gravitate towards what makes them succeed.
And that's why, again, like, this is why, like, what that guy just said, let me just pull up that quote so you guys can see it again. This quote right here is exactly why I think Covenants are going to be bad in BFA, is because Blizzard is not protecting the players from themselves. They're saying that we are going to create this system and everybody's going to play it in the way that we believe, even though there's no reason for them to do that.
People gravitate towards what makes them succeed, even if it isn't remotely fun or interesting.
Like going to college.
If it lets people win, people will do it. So when Sid says developers must protect the players from themselves, and Ian says that people are trained to min-max, what happens if we take those two things and throw them both together? Well, let's take a nice pointing question from Classic in the honor and ranking system and how it was interacted with in 2019 when it first came out. The goal and essence of the honor system is very simple: earn as much honor as possible. That is what ultimately leads to a win, that being your rank. From an RPG point of view, this is all about one player earning as much glory as they can on the battlefield for their faction and being handsomely rewarded. In reality, the most efficient grind is absolutely terrible for players. Long hours, forced pre-made, bracket stacking, phase 2 open world camping, and then inevitable drama around bracket breakers. And this has to go on for
Oh, dude, we have bracket breakers in Faralina now. And we've had it for a while, and there'll be like one guy that gets off his medication or something, and he fucking decides that he's not going to listen to the ranker Discord anymore, and he just decides, what the hell, they think they're going to tell me what to do? I play this game all day. I do whatever the hell I want. I play 24 hours a day. I get my brother to play my account too. They can't stop me. I miss America. I'm gonna farm up 200,000 honor a day. I'll be bracket 1 all fucking year. And you know, these guys, and like, it goes on for like 3 days usually, like these guys, and they farm out like a bunch of honor on the first day. And it's like, oh shit, this guy might actually break the brackets. But by like the 4th day, he's like, ah, yeah, fuck it, no, it's whatever. You know, and like, so nobody actually really breaks the brackets hardly ever, but there's a lot of people that like, they stop doing it and then like, okay, yeah, fuck it, it's just, who cares? No, I got other shit to do. You know, it's not a big deal. And yeah, sounds like Asmon. Yeah. Well, that's really what it comes down to, is like, people are going to, they will optimize fun out of the game. Like, it's completely right. And like phase 2 PvP is another example of like Blizzard introducing a system like that. And the system itself, the way you win in the system is by doing something that's not fun. And I think that's fundamentally what the problem with a lot of the metas in WoW is that the best way to do something is not fun to do. So, like, for example, the best way to farm Azerite gear is to do islands. Well, islands aren't fun to do. Like, for example, if the best way to farm gear or something like that was to push the highest Mythic Plus keys possible, then it would be more fun than just the meta being revolving around doing, you know, shitty dungeons over and over and over and hoping for like a Titan Forge or something like that. And I think that's really what the fundamental problem is is that Blizzard doesn't want to have capstone like high tier rewards. So what they have instead is they have like a benchmark reward structure where there's like a diminishing return that just like fucking, it just levels up really fast with like a mythic plus 15 versus 16 and onward. And the problem and what happens with that is that you have systems that basically reward people for repetition and not necessarily for improvement and not necessarily for enjoyment. It's just based off of repetition and engagement in the system.
Some months before you can reach the high rank. Could PvP just be done solo through Battlegrounds? Yeah, sure it could. But this is a system that fails to protect the player from themselves. And the mathematical min-max for Honor is just an awful in-game experience.
Yes, it is.
Has anyone even been rank 14 for more than 1 week in WoW's history?
I hope
Maybe
not.
on a super dead realm. How about this, once again from Ian? It's often claimed that players are better at the game than they used to be, but there hasn't really been any change in skill so much as tremendous leaps forwards in our ability to analyze and measure performance.
I disagree with that. I completely disagree with that. Like, I think that's completely untrue. That's not true. I don't know how he says that. Like, because it just, I don't know. Like, I don't think that's true. We understand the game better. Like, players have better computers, so they're able to, like, push their buttons in a better way. Like, yeah, you still have some people people are obviously better, yeah. As a comparative statement, not absolute. Well, there hasn't been much change in skill, but there hasn't really been much change in skill. I think that there has. I really think that if you looked at a player from 2006 or 2007, and then you put them in a group today, and you compared their performance with like a classic player today, that it would be a completely different universe. Like in terms of mechanical ability. Like, backpedaling was not known to be bad. And is this analyzing and measuring performance? So, like, the analyzing, I don't know. Now I'm going to have to get into the fucking statement. But I think players are much better now than they used to be. One way or another. Understand the mechanics way more now? Yeah, I'd say so.
Can find so many sites, videos, spreadsheets, and guides on gearing, enchants, consumables, and tactics to better my character. My performance in raid is accurately measured against others through details and Warcraft logs. In-game, DBM tells me when a boss does something. Azeroth Autopilot tells me where to go to level up. Leatrix Plus sells my trash items to vendors. An item rack changes gear for me. World of Warcraft's hardly the only game out there either that has been solved, so to speak. In fact, some games are made with a real emphasis on difficulty and player learning as one of the key pieces of enjoyment from them, the likes of Dark Souls, Neo, Bloodborne, or more strategy-based games like StarCraft 2 or Factorio. No matter the game, no matter the genre, a meta will be formed, and that must be adhered to when concerning a high level of play. And at the most extreme end of a meta, this is where you start getting speedruns, but one prevailing tactic that gives the fastest run is the be-all and end-all of the game now. Entire events like GDQ or ESA have formed around the communities from many games that take part in speedruns too. And I
actually really like the analogy that he's creating here between like speedrunning different games and creating metas, because there's effectively a meta that's built around the game whenever it starts being speedrun. And I think that's effectively what ends up happening, is that people are ending up speedrunning the game, and that's how you develop a meta for that game itself. It's like in Super Smash Brothers, for example, you have a meta in Super Smash Brothers, and that game's been out for, you know, a million fucking years. So it's what's going to happen no matter what. I think that developers that design games with this and like hoping that they're going to be able to like stop this from happening are stupid. I think it's a misguided decision, and the only way really to make it happen and like make it not be a misguided decision is to, I think of the best way to put it, is to just rebalance things regularly.
Little corner of the internet in Classic. Given that the content is not hard, speedruns have become the main attraction here too. Notice how in retail, nobody really cares who has the fastest clear time from boss 1 to the last boss. It's always been about who can do it first. In Classic, being able to clear it in one day is a given. It's who can do it fastest. And as with any meta, if you want to compete, you have to conform. Remember when Classic first came out and there was the whole race to world first thing? Yeah, Apes, a guild pretty much nobody outside of the private server scene knew of just popped up and completely smashed all the competition out of the water.
Yeah.
The same could happen for TBC with a totally new guild as well. These are guys who have perfected that meta over and over, server after server.
To be fair though, I don't think a lot of other guilds, for example, Method wasn't competing for world first in Classic WoW. They were just doing that so they could capitalize on the name and get people to watch their stream. It was basically clickbaiting. That's what they were doing.
Remember when Joker got world first level 60 and had over 300,000 viewers on Twitch watching him polish off those last few levels through AoE farming, and now today AoE farming is still more or less the go-to for mages, even without layers. And unlike retail, I think playing to the meta at a reasonably high level is actually a lot more accessible in Classic. We aren't talking about stacking 20 Grand Marshal warriors with full buffs and War Chief's blessing here, but having the majority of your raid short with decent gear, correct stats, enchants and world buffs, most consumables, you would have been a literal god in vanilla, rolling up to a raid after all this preparation and blasting through it in less than 1 hour and saying, wow, that was easy, is kind of the expected outcome. It's like going into a test with a sheet telling you all of the answers, and it's as simple as putting the correct answer on the correct line. Of course it's going to be easy. Whilst the guy next to you doesn't have any of these answers at hand, he's going to struggle and learn a lot more. One more quote from Soren Johnson here. The player cannot be trusted to play the game in a fun way, but rather a fashion where they will play better. Some would argue that the feeling of doing well in a difficult video game provides a kind of enjoyment, which is true. However, I'd argue that this is only a feeling many players have when they've been playing the game for a while and they initially struggled with it. The feeling that they are enjoying is a sense of achievement and progression. It's good to know when you're getting better at something you once found challenging. If there was no challenge to start with, it's unlikely that any such feeling would be experienced. It's boring.
Just like retail WoW. The game's not challenging at the beginning. You never get to the point to where you're able to overcome obstacles because the obstacles are designed for you to overcome them. They're a joke. Like, it feels good, for example, in Dark Souls 1, whenever you go back to the Undead Burg after you get gear in Anor Londo, and you can just one-shot everything, and you can just kill anything you want, and you just do ridiculous fucking damage. You're going down to Lost Izalith, and you're fighting the same bosses that you fought as the first main boss as trash mobs now. You feel like you're progressing and you're making progress. And in retail WoW, you don't give players that sense of disempowerment. And if you are not disempowered, you can't empower the player. The player begins empowered. And if the player begins empowered, then they can only lose power later on in the game. It's the worst type of learning structure possible.
Because the game is too easy, and of course some games aren't supposed to be challenging and enjoyment comes from other elements. I'd argue then that the feeling of doing well in a game does not correlate to enjoying the game.
Really,
you know, when you hear about a new game coming out and you go out of your way to avoid spoilers, yes, they're often story-driven spoilers, but you want to go into it completely fresh and see everything new firsthand. I bet you did the exact opposite with Classic, right? You want to know as much as possible. I know I did. I mean, I did a whole series on each class. How can I say I didn't want to know as much as possible? And I wouldn't have changed it if I didn't do it. I may not be here saying this right now, but it's just interesting stuff to think about, in my opinion. Enough about that. Let's move this random ball of thoughts onward to the social aspects of WoW Classic. Many players attribute the downfall of World of Warcraft to the removal of in-game opportunities to socialize with your fellow players. Yet, after seeing how many people interact with Classic, a game that very much forces you to be more social, I'm not entirely sure that's too true. Retail undoubtedly has less chance to be social, with its various queue systems, fast world travel, with portals, flying, and numerous teleportation items. Whereas in Classic, it can take literally half an hour to get to dungeons sometimes. You must find or create every single group you're part of, and then you have to trade with other players to get items created. Even then, we have a much different player dynamic than we did back in 2004. Back then, your computer was probably only capable of just running WoW by itself. You almost certainly didn't have a second monitor to watch stuff on. You didn't have Netflix, you weren't sitting on Discords with...
That's actually true. Yeah, you didn't have a second monitor. I never realized like how much that actually helps you farm more easily. Because you have like that second monitor and you just sit there and fuck around, you know what I mean? I think that's much better. Yeah.
friends, weren't talking to people on Battle.net or anything else back then. You were just playing the game, so in some ways all this downtime made you a bit more curious, a bit more inclined to reach out to the other people in game and have a bit of a conversation with them, because they're the people in front of you. It was far more novel talking to strangers online during vanilla, and you were more inclined to add random players to play with again. Also, smaller servers as well, so finding really good players was super rare, and most people didn't even know what a really good player looked like back then. Consider that for a moment.
People had no fucking
today,
idea.
most of the content doesn't need you to speak a word to another player. If you aren't doing high-level Arena Mythic Plus or Mythic Raiding, you can easily get by never saying a word. People say this is a bad thing. Honestly though, with the low-end in Classic, it requires next to no communication or information to be passed. High-end doesn't require any either. In a 40-man raid, people are happy that you can listen and follow. Only really pre-mades could require a mic in PvP. In fact, I think it's harder to have guild-wide social interaction when you need up to 40 players. 20 on retail is a lot more manageable. I personally raided a lot during the 10-man.
I'd actually disagree with that. I like having the 40-man raids. I enjoy having 40-man raids and having all the people get together and talk in Discord. I like 40-man raids a lot more personally. And yeah, the same exactly, man. I think that's fucking amazing.
Heroic days in Cataclysm, and I like that even more. Bigger isn't necessarily better from a social standpoint, and over time Blizzard have streamlined the downtime in WoW, finding groups, moving to dungeons or raids, and of course we have across servers to massively boost the player pool and retail as well. That's another thing about Classic, we have servers which are easily 3 to 4 times as large as they were back in vanilla, so there's a bit less emphasis on building relationships with people around you when you just have so many more people to draw from. What about this then? Is finding a heroic Nylofa pug in retail via LFG so different from somebody spamming a Molten Core weekly pug with a Discord attached? Why level normally and through dungeons when you can just boost through the whole experience? It really feels like players have min-maxed out the social aspects from Classic. Conversations in vanilla would have been, where are you guys from? What talents do you have? Have you guys ever done this dungeon before? And now it's pretty much water please, can we do XYZ quest, and you go. People are expected to know everything from the out.
Is that true? Because I feel like I've had more social interactions in Classic than I have in retail WoW. So like for me personally, and like this is my experience, I've met more people playing Classic WoW than playing retail WoW in BFA. So like if I compare like the entirety of BFA to just Classic WoW, I've made more friends and more connections personally with people in Classic than I have in the entire time in BFA.
Set, and the more I see this, the more I'm not surprised WoW has taken the route that it has in terms of removing large portions of downtime. We even had a Classic LFG for a brief period pre-launch as well. Imagine that. Finally, let's talk about how players interact with content. I got a really good message from a viewer the other day about how turned off many WoW players are to non-conventional things to do in game. You know, goals that aren't raid, PvP and grind gold. Stuff like rep grinds, collections, personal challenges, and even twinking is nowhere near as popular as it was in vanilla. And honestly, I'm quite surprised at how very few players are actually going for objectives like this in game. Not many people are doing things like this. If and when we get to Wrath the Lich King Classic, I bet there will be tons and tons of players going for 100% achievements, because now they will actually have a tangible goal to chase when they are in game. Not to say that a lot of achievement-based things haven't been done in Classic. Just over the past few weeks, we've had a 40-man Druid group complete Molten Core and a 40-man Paladin.
They're definitely right. He's definitely right about how once you have a in-game tracker for a goal, the goal becomes much more compelling for people. 100%
Group complete that objective as well. We had a Nixie done the other day where every single player in the raid had no gear.
That was fucking funny to watch, dude. That was hilarious.
Which was a thing for a little bit, where the idea was if your character dies anywhere from the journey from 1 to 60, you have to delete and start again. But it never really took off too much.
Iron Man.
I think an Iron Man challenge has some potential in Classic, that being no trading or grouping, but I think it runs into issues with late game content where progress really comes to a halt because of the limitations, lack of gear progression, and lack of tangible benchmark achievements beyond 16 profession caps. Old school RuneScape had a player-imposed challenge like this, and it became so popular that it was made into an official game mode. Old school RuneScape does fit this format very well though, I'll admit that.
Makes sense.
Even now,
Yeah.
Kungun has returned and is attempting a community-driven challenge. This kind of thing has the best chance to work, where essentially they want to clear all the content whilst only using green quality items, which is kind of a, it was sure a better game back then kind of thing. Still, I'm interested to see how far it goes and what they can achieve. I mean, Onyxia was defeated by a zero gear raid, so that gives you some hope at least. So,
Yeah, it's easy.
given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game. I don't think I've ever seen a title where this has held more true than for Classic. Not just in optimization towards the content, but the idea that this is the only way to play the game. Not that optimization can't be enjoyable, of course. We can turn off all our add-ons, reset to the default UI, but there are things you can't unwillingly change. Picking a quest reward because you know it's an upgrade over something that looks cool, knowing which zone to go into quest next, understanding where your gold is best spent on leveling abilities and buying items. And despite all this, and this being one of the most optimized games I have ever seen, there are still new discoveries being made by our massive player base.
Every once in a while, yeah.
Things that Blizzard had to nerf. And at the end of the day, everyone does enjoy the game differently, but it's hard to get away from a meta or being drawn to the best solution for your problem. And the more you play, the harder this becomes to avoid. At this point, a lot of people are waiting for TBC to fix Classic, and just as many will be waiting for Wrath of the Lich King to fix TBC when we get there. But you can't really ever fix how games are approached now as compared to how they were back then. That's it then. Just a few thoughts recently after having read a few bits and pieces online and how they ring true for Classic for me. But like I started off with, there's no sort of big conclusion or realization to be had here, at least for me. So you'll have to let me know what this video made you think about Classic and how it's evolved, if anything. So you can let me know below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one very soon. If you like what you see, give the video a like.
I think this is a good video. I liked it a lot. I always liked the conversations about that.
In the next one.
I always have liked the conversations about the meta of gaming and stuff like that. So I'm very glad that he's talking about it, man. What's different this time? That's about right, man. Like, the game is just, it's a very good analogy to say that, like, you know, or a very good analysis to say, like, you know, people think TBC is going to make everything better, but, like, here's the problem with TBC. If they release TBC and they just have, like, they have Blood Elf Paladins, what do you call it? They have Blood Elf Paladins with Seal of Blood. What's going to end up happening is that Blood Elf Paladins and Horde is just going to be massively dominant to the point where it just completely overpowers the Alliance. And I worry that that's what's going to happen. And I think that's what will happen. And I don't know, man. AOC will kill WoW? The game's not even in alpha yet. Wait for it to go into alpha. Good call on my server and Discord. People use the parses lower reason to justify not even talking to them. Jesus, dude. Like, the classic WoW elitism, in my opinion, is the dumbest and saddest fucking thing I have ever seen. Okay? Like, I'm sorry, but the game's not that hard to build an ego over it that big, okay, man? It's just not that fucking hard. Here's how I look at it, is that I think that players need to understand that the way that people play games now is just simply different than the way that it used to be. People have different goals, they approach their problems differently, and everything is completely different. And we can't really ever go back to a time before that was the case. And that's always been, like, my logic behind why I don't think the way that Blizzard is approaching Covenants is a good idea. Because I think the way that they're approaching it is they're saying, well, we're going to bury our head in the sand. We're going to pretend like this problem isn't real. And because we're pretending like the problem isn't real, well, then the problem's not real. And there it is. It's problem solved. And I think that's what ends up fucking happening, man. I'm very upset about that, but, you know, I think that's what it's going to be. And it's like pretending like it's not happening and then developing the game with, like, basically being willfully ignorant about the way people will approach it is actually more harmful to the player base than just looking at it objectively and making a decision that actually just makes the game better. And I think that's what's going to end up being the outcome, man. And it's not a problem if you don't look at it. Yeah, exactly, man. Yo, well, just don't look at how to play your class. Just play what's fun. Just play what's fun, man. Just play what's fun. Just do what's fun, man.